Gantiga, and today I'll be doing a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier analysis video on Reptiliannes and Vendreads. Reptilians are a 5D archetype of reptile monsters that focuses on reducing your opponent's attack to 0. And prior to their most recent support, they didn't really do much of a good job at that. Tried making this deck work so many times, especially during the dueling network days, and this deck was really bad and it flopped. But as you'll see in the upcoming Reptilian duel videos, as well as in this video, you're going to see that Reptilian has improved quite a bit. Also, I'm sorry about not recording a video on the new cards. I was already too late on that, plus I was busy with work, as well as, the usual procrastination. I've still yet to get over that bad habit. But anyways, let's get right into this. For the pros, this deck has good boss monsters. Vasky and the Gorgon card. Not Gorgon, Medusa card, which technically Medusa is a Gorgon, right? Anyways, Medusa isn't a bad card, neither is Visky. But now you also got your Hydra, which is a lot more consistent to actually get off now. And you have your Reptilian Melusine, which is my favorite reptilian card. Hell, I think it's my favorite reptile card ever. Anyways, you now have those cards which allow you to actually... Yeah, basically the problem with the deck before is there weren't that many consistent ways to get your opponent's attack down to 0. There weren't that many generic cards that could do that, which made Reptilian really bad. But the only way you could actually do that is with by crashing some of your smaller reptilians into your opponent's monsters, which again was really bad. Because even after you reduce their attack to 0, they could just get rid of the monster, use it for a synchro summon or an Xyz summon. And I'm talking about during the times of classic. What I mean by classic, I mean pre-Master Rule 4. But it was definitely harder to get off, especially during the Link era, where you most likely were going to use up all your monsters on the field to summon a bunch of monsters from your extra deck. So Reptilians, they were kind of shit out of luck. Like prior to this support, I would say they're one of the worst archetypes. Yeah, they were one of the worst archetypes ever. But now they actually have ways to make use of their win condition, since now they have even more ways to reduce attack down to 0, and it's a lot more consistent than it was before. Also, this deck has good spell cards, because the new spell cards, with the exception of the field spell, are really good. Hell, even the field spell is pretty good, and I just don't like the field spell as much because it could be very bricky, but at the same time it's also nice to have from time to time, because that's also a good incentive for your opponent not to use monster effects, especially the monster effects of monsters you actually reduce down to 0. This deck is very consistent. This deck has a lot of search cards. I think the Link monster was pretty nutty, but again, the Link monster helped out Reptilians a little bit, but it was this new support that actually pushed them over the edge. And yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. They have a lot of searchers. The Reptilian Link monster is a really, really, really good searcher. It can search up to basically 5 cards, but let's be real, your opponent's not gonna have 5 monsters with 0 attack, but still, you can potentially search a lot of cards off of the Link monster. And I think they even gave you a spell card that you can search monster and a trap, or you can search either or while also reducing an opponent's monster's attack down to 0. Which again, like I mentioned, is really good because now you have way more options with Reptilian. As far as what you want to do, like add cards or reduce down to 0. Not options like in strategy options. Anyway, because this deck is gimmicky. But I still like this deck nonetheless, but I don't want to waste too much time talking about that. This deck can swarm thanks to its new support. Like that card that allows you to special summon from hand is really nice, as well as which is a level 4 tuner, which is a little bit odd, but It is what it is. And a new level 2 monster, which can special summon itself from the graveyard if your opponent controls a monster with 0 attack, but you can't use its first effect and the second effect at the same time. I do like both effects, and yes, it's a little bit annoying to only use one of each effect, but I can kind of see why Konami did that. Also, this deck has a lot more search power now. Like I mentioned, you have so many ways to actually search things, and not to mention you can even search just reptilian spells and traps. But there's no reptilian traps, so you can search any of the spells. And one of the spells is actually a token spawner, which is actually way more useful now since now you have more synchro options as well as you can just. It's just basically a one card echidna, and echidna is really good since right off the bat you get one search and you get to reduce the monster's attack to 0, which is pretty nice. Also, especially if you use Lamification, you can add a reptilian monster you to your hand, and you could take advantage of the fact that your opponent has a monster with 0 attack as is. Next, this deck has good defense because, as you'll see in the upcoming duel video, that level 2 monster is actually really, really good. It can prevent OTKs, and it can actually put your opponent in quite a predicament, as well as it can basically help stall for turns as well. Not to mention, you also have cards like Reptilian Gardener, which if they destroy it, you get to add the card whose name I forgot, but it's basically the new level 2 Reptilian monster. But for the cons, this deck lacks versatility because this deck at the end of the day is a gimmick deck, and its gimmick is reducing your opponent's attack down to 0. Obviously, during the 5Ds era, something like this would have been too powerful, so of course you had a lot of cards in this archetype that worked really slow and really suckily. I'm, that's not a word, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like you had to jump through hoops just to do that, and by then the win condition doesn't even become worth it anymore. But now, but basically, this new support is more or less dedicated to actually helping them get to their win condition as fast as possible, and that is to reduce the attack down to 0. At the moment, they don't really have much space to do much of anything as far as versatility goes. They can potentially give the deck an extra deck monster that acts like a skill drain for monsters with 0 attack, but I don't really see Konami doing that for right now, and besides, the deck is pretty fine despite its lack of versatility. And the last con is it usually can't play through more than 2 to 3 disruptions, which is actually something I never thought I'd ever say about Reptilian because I don't expect this deck to even play through 1 disruption, let alone 2 to 3. For power, I'd give this deck a 2.5 out of 5. Most of its monsters aren't really that big or beefy, but because they can now more consistently reduce attack down to 0, they can beat over a lot of things. And I think, and under very rare circumstances, they can OTK and clear boards. For defense, I'd give this deck a 3.5 out of 5 because, like I mentioned, this deck can actually keep you in the game fairly well, or at least surprisingly well. Level 2 monster helps prevent OTKs, and even this thing, which is my favorite reptilian monster so far, even this thing can actually provide very great defense, since if you're playing reptilians, you're most likely going to be summoning it only using reptilian monsters. So it won't be destroyed by a card effect or by battle. Yes, it could be spun and removed many other ways, but it's still very decent protection. Not to mention this card can also just reduce attacks down to 0 permanently for every time your opponent activates a card. Like not activates a card, activates a monster effect. I mean, obviously not multiple in the same chain. It's basically like Ball of Drop, but cooler. For recovery, I'd give this deck a 2.5 out of 5. Yeah, they have some cards that help you recover, like the level 4 tuner as well as a new level 2, or even a field spell, because if you have the field spell and no cards in your hand and you top deck Gardner, you could pop Gardner, summon back one of your reptilian monsters from the graveyard. So you could, assuming you properly summon this thing, you can actually bring this thing back from the graveyard while also get a search off of your Gardner. And if this thing is on the field, you can reduce something to 0 attack, and the field spell would also allow you to snatch their monster. But I think for that to happen, you have to control. Yeah, no, you can control any reptilian. I forgot that only the first effect requires you to pop a 0 attack reptilian. And for versatility, like I said, it's mostly gimmick based, so of course it's not going to be as versatile, but with this deck, it's not really much of a problem. And for consistency, I'd give this deck a 4 out of 5 since they can actually achieve their win condition very easily, or at least way more than they were before. And I'm actually glad about that. Not to mention, this deck has a ridiculous amount of searchers, arguably as many searchers as Arctics. And Arctics are going to be a topic for another video. Next and lastly, we are talking about Vendreads. And boy, do I have a lot to say about Vendreads. Vendreads are a ritual archetype that actually had a lot of promise. They were a TCG exclusive, but then halfway through, Konami kind of just dropped the ball with them. For the pros, they have good boss monsters. Almost all their ritual monsters, with the exception of Chimera, were actually good. They have better ritual summoning method, excuse me, which did not save this deck in the slightest. Yes, it was cool that if your rituals were in the graveyard, you didn't really have to go -2 just to perform a ritual summon. But it was still, the problems with rituals were just still there. The ritual summoning was still a heavy cost in this deck, plus most of your Vendread ritual monsters are practically useless unless you ritual summon using Vendread monsters from on the field. Which brings me to which basically brings me to the next main issue. They lack the ability to consistently put multiple Vendreads on the field, especially without negging. Because one of their spell cards called, like, I think Vendread Invasion, you have to discard a card just so you can summon a Vendread card from deck. That is pretty bad. And you want to know why that's pretty bad? You're going neg. And when you go neg to do that, yes, if you pitch, like I think Vendread Horde or Hound, you can just summon it back using its effect. But if I were to remember correctly, you would also have to discard for that effect. So basically, you're just putting in a lot of resources for a ritual monster that your opponent can potentially easily out. And that was one of the problems. But you want to know what ironically would have made this deck really, really good? Is if Vendread Invasion actually lived up to its name. It's supposed to be an invasion, meaning that you're supposed to be swarmed by an invasion of zombies. So one would think it would be like a soul charge effect, like you discard one, special summon as many Vendreads from your graveyard as possible. That's not really all that, and it locks you into Vendread monsters. That wouldn't really be all that broken, would it? It would actually help Vengeance out, as well as actually allow them to achieve their win condition. But it just discards and summons one from deck. If it at least summoned 2 from deck, sure. But what kind of invasion is that where you only summon 1 Vendread? That could have actually been really good, but it just feels like Konami did everything in their power just to hurt this deck. For real. Anyways. This deck has decent spells and traps, despite my long rant. They do have some good cards. Their ritual cards, or at least their ritual spells, are really, really good. And some of their traps, despite them being very, very, I don't know how to put this, counterintuitive towards a ritual archetype, some of them are actually pretty good. Like, so good to where if you put them in other archetypes that weren't ritual or fusion based, they would probably be very, very powerful, or some would even consider them to be somewhat busted. But in this deck, hold up. That was my alarm, but anyways. But in this deck, it's they're kind of just they're decent. And the other plus is that this deck can float because your Horde floats, your Hound floats, even Vendreads Slayer floats, which is pretty nice, but it's not really enough, to be completely honest. Not to mention, it sucks that Horde actually gets banished. Like, at least just have it stay, like, have stay in the graveyard, but you don't even get that much. And this deck is fairly versatile since the Vendread monsters, if used for a ritual summon while on the field, can actually grant your Vendread ritual monsters a lot of neat effects. Now for the cons, and yes, I'm now getting to the cons despite my long rants. They lack the ability to swarm. That is their main issue, and that's their most pervasive issue. They can't do anything unless you get them out onto the field with a lot of effects. And not to mention, you are using up a lot of resources just so you could even do that. Which says a lot since I think, like, one of the. Yeah, Slayer, when it goes to the graveyard, allows you to add things from your deck to your hand. But one of the main issues is you're putting in a lot of resources into a monster that if your opponent gets rid of, you're kind of screwed. Like, if you get out your Vendread Slayer with the ability to banish spells and traps, that is really strong, but your opponent can still easily out that, and if they out it, then that's kind of it. You use them a lot of resources just so you can summon your ritual monster, just so it can get outed just like that. Like, I feel like this deck just needs one or two good cards to actually make it very good. But as it stands now, it actually, like, its win condition just suffers because of Konami's weird oversight. And lastly, it usually can't play through more than one disruption. We know. For power, I'd give this deck a 2.5 out of 5. They have standard attacks, so it is what it is. Their defense, also pretty standard. Their ritual spell that allows you to protect your ritual monster is pretty nice, which adds to its defense. But other than that, the deck doesn't really have too much defense. For recovery, yeah, they can recover, which is one of the reasons why I'm not going to say that this deck is somewhat of a glass cannon, even though the things I said before would make you believe that. But like I mentioned, some of their cards float, so you can recover from that, but you can't really do too much from that. For versatility, I'd give this deck a 3 out of 5. And for consistency, I'd give this deck a 3 out of 5. So overall, this deck is a tier 3.5 deck. And I really hope Konami actually does more for this archetype, but as it is, it's very, very duty. And it's been me, your boy Blue Gadget Guy, and I'm out.